What's up, Denver? We have some breaking news in the world of ADUs. Denver City Council on July 5th passed a bunch of updates to what can be done with zoning and ADUs in general. And we just happen to have someone in the studio today who helped work on it. He's got a really cool story. Before he actually helped Denver rewrite these laws, he got plugged in Bigger Pockets years ago, got bored, built his own ADU. Now it's a full-time design and build business, helping people build ADUs around Denver. So a great podcast on ADUs today. And of course, I'm talking ADUs. I got my co-host, Stacy Rozansky. Good morning, Stacy.
Morning, Chris. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here, and I'm excited to have Matthew in the studio. You got a great guest for us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Matthew.
Yeah, so like I said, Matthew, Bigger Pockets listener, got bored over COVID, built an ADU, architecture background. A bunch of friends and family said, Matthew, do this for me. Now it's a full-time design business. So we're going to talk what he did, how he grew his business, got into real estate, what he does, and a bunch of things everyone should know when it comes to ADUs.
Yep.
Glad to have you here, Matthew.
Yeah. Howdy, everyone. Glad to be here. This is exciting.
So actually, I gave you the full Matthew Krick. Sorry, I forgot. I haven't even said your last name yet so far. So, of course, all your LinkedIn and details will be in the show notes.
Yep.
But Matthew, let's talk about your story. You're a full-time architect with 9 to 5, and you found this thing called Bigger Pockets, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. How'd you come across it?
It was another architect friend of mine. He said, hey, you should listen to Bigger Pockets, and we should buy a house together and flip it and do all that. And
sounds like a smart guy.
Yeah, he was smart. And I still ask him all the time for different questions. But we ended up, he was my roommate at the time, and I ended up getting married, and so I went a different path, and he got his own house. But he did get me hooked, and I started just listening to those every day. And it took me about 300 episodes to finally do something. But when COVID happened, I think like a lot of us, I was bored at home and trying to find something to fill up my time. So I started designing an accessory dwelling unit, or an ADU, in my backyard. They're known as like carriage houses or granny flats or casitas, or there's a lot of different names for them. But so I started designing my backyard, and my goal was to build it all myself, and to go and build it for $150,000 was my initial goal, and that's what I told my wife I could do. I could do it. So
what was the final cost?
$298. So I doubled it, but
not quite.
I was close. Yeah. No. Yeah. But some things happened. We had some kids in the meantime, and I couldn't do everything myself. And so I had to hire some crews to help out with some stuff. But I GC'd myself, and I designed myself, and I did almost all the finishes myself. But
so what part of town is your house in?
I live in the Lincoln Park neighborhood in Denver.
Okay. And so, give a couple just, highlight how the ADU built went, and then just the setup of your house, the ADU, what you use it for.
Yeah. So I live on a really tiny, skinny lot. It's only 25 feet wide by 125. So it's one of the smallest lots you can get in Denver. So trying to maximize and fit something onto that was extremely tough. I only have 3 feet on either side clearance, and but I ended up getting 1,500 square feet. It's a 2-car garage with a 1 bedroom above, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and it's actually bigger than my house in the front, which is pretty funny.
Oh wow!
Because I have a 1-story ranch, 2-bedroom in the front, and
so the ADU is 1,500 square foot living space.
It's 500 garage, 700 living.
Okay.
Yeah. So it I have a 2-car garage now, which is great. Before I had nothing. I had just a concrete pad back there.
Yep.
And it was really tough trying to stage things, trying to get materials in, and I would never build on that skinny of a lot almost ever again. It's really tight. But I learned so much from it, and in the process of kind of building and doing it, I had a neighbor ask me, hey, Matthew, can you do one for me? And I was like, yeah, I can design one on the side. And then I had another neighbor ask me, and I was like, oh, okay, I got 2 side projects going on. And at the time I was still working at my firm, which was Shears Atkins Rockmore, did a bunch of commercial, bigger architecture and stuff. And but eventually got to the point where I had 3 or 4 clients, and I could do my own thing. And I was like, it was during the time of the Great Resignation, and I think I followed suit with everyone else. And I was like, heck with this. I'm out of here. I'm going to start my own business. And so I did. And Krick Design Build was born. And at first I was just a designer on a lot of things, and I helped design a bunch of different ADUs from across the city, and started getting into stuff like Lakewood or Idaho Springs, or kind of branching out to the whole Front Range. And I worked with a bunch of different GCs, probably 8 or 10 of them, and
Mm-hmm.
they all range. And some of them were really good, and some of them I'm still very good friends with. Some of them were kind of shady, not the best. So I said, like,
That's the way business goes.
yeah, and I didn't always get to choose them. Sometimes the client had the GC already picked out, or sometimes they were the GC. And but I was thinking, like, I need to get something that's better for my clients. I'm going to do something that's from the first sketch to the last coat of paint. And that's when I decided, okay, let's make the full design build business. And that's when my dad moved back here to Colorado, and he's a great builder, and he's really good at watching people on site and getting grumpy at them and if they mess something up. And so him and I have been doing that now I've been doing it for almost 2 years. And
Is he more like boots on the ground on the sites,
Yeah.
running it, and you're
he's the site
Does-
superintendent,
okay?
and I'm more I design it with the customer, but then I also am the face for the customer and
Yep.
help them get through all the process of getting good lending, or getting different contractors on board, or getting all the designs through permitting and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff to go through.
Okay.
That
So after you kind of built yours, started taking on some clients, what would you say as like the, kind of first, if someone approaches you and says, I'm ready to build an ADU, what are the first steps they need to look into to kind of get that process started?
Well, first it's your zoning, of course. And you have to make sure, in Denver, it has a little 1 at the end of it. And that pretty much cues you in if you can do an ADU. If you're a tandem unit or row house, there's other ones like that. But it in the zoning code, it will say very quickly if you can do an accessory dwelling unit or not. And then there's a lot of calculations that go into actually how big it can be, and if it's actually a practical size for you. You have to take into account how big your front house is, and then it's a coverage requirement of how big your back house can be. So in my situation, I had a small front house, so I could build a big ADU in the back. But a lot of people, if they already have a garage and they have a shed and they have a big house, then they can only build a kind of tiny size ADU, and it just doesn't make sense for them. So you gotta look at the zoning first and see what you can build. And I do like test fits with clients to say, you can build 1,000 square foot, or you can build 800 or something like that. And then it's a 2-year commitment. That's what I tell all my clients. It's a big deal. It takes a lot of time. You spend a lot of time with me talking back and forth, but the design part can take anywhere from 4 months to 6 months, depending if you need to get a zoning or variance, or if you're in a historic district or something like that. And then it takes about 6 months to get through permitting, which is maybe sometimes longer. Well, longest one was 9 months because Denver's was super slow. And then to build, I build them as quick as 8 months, but sometimes they take a year and a half, depending on if we have all the financing in place and if everything's going smoothly with supply chains and stuff like that. But
That's good to know up front for sure.
Yeah. So I would just plan on 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So you had mentioned one thing I'm really interested to talk about is, like, I'll say breaking news. I'm recording this middle of July, and so I guess about 10 days ago, I think
July 18th.
Yeah, Denver officially went into did a bunch of new zoning,
Yep.
and you were part of that. So tell us what it is, like, because real estate is a slow moving beast, and it's always fun to have someone at the table who was at the other table, helping make those plans.
And this is like 3 years in the making to try to change these rules. I was bugging these planners for a couple of years that, hey, we should set up a committee because we are not getting enough ADUs in Denver. And it, like, to date, since the overall bigger zoning changes happened back in 2011, they only built like 600 ADUs in all of Denver. It was a very small number.
And you're talking Denver County, right?
Yeah, Denver County. If you compare it to LA, I've heard a stat where 40% of the new residential permits are all accessory dwelling units or something like that.
No way, really?
It was a huge number because they're just so much more open. A lot of those are conversions and some of those are new builds. But when you have a built out city, there's not any new subdivisions you can build, but you can build in place and start filling in the pockets. So
yeah,
that's why, a lot of those new constructions were ADUs in LA, and it's happening all up and down the West Coast. But here in Denver, we just weren't doing it. And my biggest critique was, I think, it's because it was the zoning. We had a very conservative zoning code for this type of building, and though we're very progressive in other areas, this ADU people were scared of it, and people made rules based on that timidness to have a backyard cottage in your backyard.
And I think we've talked about it before. if it's one of the most, if not the most regulated building form in the Denver zoning code is the ADU.
It is, yeah, it's tough, and it's one of the hardest ones to build. Per square foot, you're paying some of the highest prices because it's a tiny house squeezed, or it has all the amenities of a big house squeezed into a tiny package.
Yeah.
And they're all infill properties, so you don't have a clean lot to just go out and build on. You have to really stage how you get everything in. But with that zoning code change, we did the ADU advisory committee. That was a year-long process where they had, I think, 20 different people throughout the city in different walks of life all come together and talk about how.
Were you on that committee? You were one of
I was on the architecture focus group for that committee. So they came to the architects and asked, hey, what specific zoning code rules can we change to make these more feasible and more practical? And they had some silly ones on there, like before you had to reduce the upper story by, they call it the 1/2 story rule, but you had to reduce it by 25%. So your upper story was smaller than the lower story.
Like in total square footage, or just in footprint?
It's either total square footage, or you could slope the walls so that you had kind of really low sloped roofs on the other side. It made for a weird building. It made the engineering kind of weird, and it ended up you had a lot less space because a lot of people put a garage on the first floor and they put the living space up above. So you could only squeeze in maybe a 400, 500 square foot apartment up there, and that's when you're looking at a price tag of over $300K. That's expensive.
That is,
right.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's almost a penthouse you're building there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you don't, so that was one. And then another one was, so we got the full 2 stories now. We don't have to do any reductions up there.
Oh, that's good.
A big one was also the suburban lots. You couldn't really build on suburban lots. It didn't have
What's a suburban lot?
So there's urban lots, which are more downtown lots in Denver. There's urban edge, which is kind of, you're getting more into like a,
what would
Cap
be
Hill.
an
Second
urban?
tier, yeah.
Yeah. So what would be like an urban neighborhood?
Cap Hill.
Cap Hill. What would be an urban edge?
I'd say City Park or something, or kind of getting out a little further.
Okay.
Congress Park.
Yeah,
Like
Congress
kind of
Park.
that.
Okay. And then suburban's the next ring.
Like Barnum, or kind of like getting into Montview, or kind of that's more suburban ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I actually also helped out on the committee in that suburban context because I live in the outer edge of Denver in the suburban area. And that's where, like, as they were discussing, we want ADUs everywhere, but, the suburban area wasn't really built for that. And so how do we fit them in?
And that's because of the lack of alleys?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Not having an alley kind of complicates it, but you can still totally do it. A lot of other cities
Well,
do
and
it.
the thing about suburban lots is they're bigger. And so they do have the space for them, but it's how do you fit them on there?
There was a lot of reluctance for those suburban lots because those suburban homeowners, they were like very NIMBYs, and they said,
Yep.
No, we don't want ADUs here.
We bought in the
family.
suburban part for a reason.
Yeah. So the NIMBYs came out and they fought against it for many years, but we triumphed, and we made some new additions to zoning code where suburban lots can now do it. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm still not zoned for it, even though I live in the suburban lot. But it opens it up because you can rezone your lot in 3 or 4 months, and it costs $1,000 in Denver. And then you're allowed to build it in a suburban lot. So what it effectively did is it opened up all the suburban communities to have a path to get there.
Okay.
It's still not an easy path, but they can now do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, is there one, thing that you can pinpoint from these changes that's like would have the biggest impact for people?
My favorite is they're letting duplexes build ADUs now. So if you own a duplex, you can now build 2 ADUs in the back, making it a quadplex.
That's great.
That was always kind of something like, historically they did it here in Denver, but then it wasn't in the rules for duplexes. But
so is it basically like a mini duplex in the back? Then we can like do a duplex ADU, or are they separate, or does it matter?
They're kind of separate. They probably have a party wall that's
okay.
So they're connected, but they're completely
so it
isolated,
could be
separate.
one building.
Yeah.
So it could basically be just
two
a
separate
mini
ADUs.
duplex out back.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah.
Like I have a client that he has he's on a tandem use lot, and he has one building in front, so we're going to build another building next to that, make it a duplex, and then build 2 garages in the back with ADUs over top of it.
And is this an investment property he has?
Yeah. So he's changing that one building into a 4-plex on the same lot.
So this is basically, is it going to keep it as like build to rent or build to sell? Do you know?
I think he rents it more, that client.
That's really cool.
But you can go either way.
Yeah.
And the duplexes are actually, if you're building to sell, you're going to get a lot more money from a duplex than you will an ADU.
Yeah.
Great.
Because you can make a duplex.
Do you know like what's the rough number to basically take that and build like essentially a fourplex? Is that a $1 million project or?
So for a duplex, I have one client that's
one.
building each side of the duplex for 400. So like, let's say 800. He plans to sell each side for about $1 million.
Yeah.
So he's making 600 plus there. And then the ADUs, if you build a duplex, I think you could do each one for like $325 each.
What about build to rent? Because it'll be lower.
Oh yeah, if it's
being less
money.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe if having it as a duplex and having all those contractors kind of go jump around from the different buildings saves a lot of money. So maybe get down to 300.
300 per
300 per ADU, or so 300, and then 600, or I'd say 800. So 16 plus. So
Math on the air. Come on.
I know.
So maybe
Okay.
it's a
Numbers
one and a
fast,
half
I'm at a build
million.
to rent.
If you do the fourplex, I'd say it's $1.5 million, but then you can sell it off for somewhere in a $3 million range.
Yeah,
Or if you
there's
rent
room
it.
there.
Really?
Yeah. It's I think the biggest game changer for these things is when you sell them off, they're not viewed as just an extra bedroom. It's more like a duplex. And so you're selling each part of it duplex. And you can do kind of a la carte if you make it into a small HOA. You can
So these are separately deeded though? Is it basically two party walls, four?
Yeah, it's
Four
so you could
addresses?
split it up if it's a tandem lot like that.
Okay.
I think you could do 4 addresses now.
Oh, wow.
So that's been the biggest game changer. I'm excited to start designing those in Denver. And getting those that'll be really exciting. That's what I want to personally do next. Is get a tandem property and then build a duplex in front and duplex ADUs in the back, and then let it rip.
And then sell them off or rent it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to lose either way. You can.
Yeah, what would you do? I'm curious. If you did it tomorrow, would you build to sell that, or would you build to rent it?
Both. I would rent it for a while and do some Airbnb and kind of get some of that principal down, and then eventually sell it.
Okay.
But like let's take my property for instance. I make, after I built my ADU, it cost me $298. I get about $3,000 a month from Airbnb. That's after cleaning and all that, and out the taxes, of course. So I can keep doing that and keep making $36,000 a year plus for my family, which helps me live mortgage free, or we actually use it for daycare.
Sounds about right.
It's more expensive than my mortgage.
Yep.
But we're also, because we have the second kid, now we're thinking about selling. And so I got it appraised by a few different real estate agents, and they said that they evaluated the ADU around $450, and I built it for $298. So you're looking at a $150,000 ad right there, and so you make $150 in a year if you build an ADU. So you can rent us for as long as you want, as long as it makes sense to you. For me, it made a lot of sense because we had family coming into town. It's a great place for them to stay, and then we let people stay there for Airbnb, and then when we're not using it, and so. But now my family's grown, so we're gonna sell it. But,
Cool.
So yeah, I think you can't lose. But the biggest money maker is when you actually do sell it.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to predict how much you're going to get because there are no comps around Denver. Every appraiser is going to tell you that. Have you seen
anyone take a big haircut when they built it? And
I've seen some of these ADUs get a little crazy and get up into the 400s. And maybe that's a 3-car garage with really nice finishes up front. And I don't think those people are really doing a renter grade type of situation.
Yeah.
They're doing I want the best setup for my house, and I want this. I want to be able to live in here and hang out and watch Bronco games up there. It's cool stuff like that. So if those people turn around and sold it, they wouldn't make that much money. But
if you say cabin in the middle of the fairway, you'll.
Yeah, I think so.
Always
if you're
comes down
conscious,
to those finishes.
if you're conscious of it,
Okay.
and you find the right builder, and you find and you also you don't have to build as big as you possibly can. A lot of people just think I want to, I have this much space, I want to build. But if you keep it a little bit smaller, you can save a good amount of money, and keeping the design simple too. A lot of people don't realize with the architect, they just might let them go crazy and design whatever they want, but you got to rein them in and say, okay, maybe we don't do metal panel siding everywhere. Maybe we just do hardy board, or maybe we do something. You can still make stucco look really nice. if you do it well. And so I had a client. He had a separate architect. It originally came in at like $400K, and we're gonna be the GC on this project. And we're like, okay, we can change a lot of things, and we can bring it down to like 300. Are you interested? And he's like, yeah, of course. And it's like, I didn't know my architect was doing this. I'm like, he had custom everything and really expensive finishes. And but I was like, you can bring it down. I don't think that architect likes me very much, but yeah, because I changed a lot of his design. But
That's the way it goes sometimes.
the client does. Client likes us. So yeah. And I think do a lot of cost estimates as you're building too. A lot of people just they think that the architect is kind of in line with what they want, but I've seen some architects just.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's your own money. You always want to make sure that it's your own money that you are spending it the way you want to. Yeah. And it's different than you're advising them or say, this is my own $250,000 I'm playing around with. Yeah. So I'm going to go back around to these updates to the Denver zoning code here. We named a couple. Any other big changes that came out of that?
There was also one called the minimum lot size. And so like there was a lot, they rezoned all of Sloan's Lake, which was a big deal. It made news. But then actually when they looked at it, a lot of the lots were too small to allow for an ADU because they didn't meet the minimum lot size. And it was kind of a big oversight, I think. So we were like, okay, why do we even have this minimum lot size? If you can build on your lot, just go for it. You know, it's a small lot. It's slightly smaller than normal. Who cares? So we got rid of the minimum lot sizes, which opens up a ton of different properties throughout the city. Not sure why that was really there in the first place.
So instead of the minimum, so you still have to meet like the coverage ratio that you were talking about earlier, but now it doesn't matter, you know, if you're on a 3,000 square foot, 6,000 square foot, whatever it might be. Yeah.
So any lot size you can now build. Another one was they regulated the size of ADU per the lot size. So if you had a 5,000 square foot lot, you could build a 800 or 1,000 square foot ADU. But now they got rid of the smallest size. They used to really limit you down to 600, which meant when you built that upper story, it was only 400. And so they kind of started that clean and said, okay, it could just be 800 minimum, and then it goes up from there. Okay. Which has helped some of my clients, particularly. So I for example, I had one client, he thought he had a 50-foot wide lot. And so we designed an ADU that was 800 square feet. And we found out when the survey came back, it was actually 49 foot wide, which then bumped him down to the 600 square foot. And he was really sad about that because he just lost 200 square feet because his lot size was 1 foot off.
Oh, wow.
So
measure first, right? Or measure twice?
Yeah. But sometimes those surveyors, they might take like 2 months to get you a survey because they're so busy. So we start designing in the meantime, and then we find out later. And so got to make changes. But everyone's so busy. Everyone's trying to rush through it. But anyway, that got changed. That was another big one. And you could now do a balcony on the back. Every single client I had wanted to do a balcony that faced the mountains or something like that, right? But we couldn't do it. And it was all because of somewhere near DU, there was like a big party happening on a carriage house on the deck. And these older neighbors called into the city and they got their city councilman to say, no more decks on any ADU in the city.
Wow.
It was a very specific council member that did it. I think it was Hines. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it was in that area. And I know it was a bunch of older people that got that pushed through. And that just became law because those couple people complained. And it was just so silly. Everyone loves to have a deck out there. They love to have some outdoor space. I mean, we have great weather here. Why not put a balcony? So you're now allowed to put a 100 square foot balcony. And I was able to, the reason I was able to convince them of that is I told them a story where I had this like kind of crazy cracked out guy in my alley. And I went to go approach him because he was sitting there for hours in his truck. And there was like this might be a little weird, but there was a lady.
We're talking real estate. Bring it on.
There was a lady strung out in the back of his truck, and then in the front of his truck, he had a bunch of machetes and guns and crosses, and I was like, this guy's all over the place. So I didn't approach him. I was like, this is not safe. So I went up to my deck of my ADU, and I looked over and made the phone call to the police. They came and they immediately arrested him because they just see all the stuff he had in his car, and he tried running away. But anyway, I was like, having those porches on the back of the alley makes it that much safer. And we have a problem of some of the people experiencing homelessness in the city. And so making our alley safer should be a concern. It should be a goal for us. So that's why I was like, let us have balconies on the alley. Why not, guys? I know there will be some parties, yes, but you can have different like rental agreements, or you can have, if you have a short-term license, you can take away the license if they're not playing by the rules or being too loud.
That just seems like common sense. I mean, just because you have a balcony doesn't mean you have like loud college parties there every weekend.
Yeah. So that was a big change. I'm really excited about that.
Well, I know there was one change before we hit record, Stacy. You're like, this is all great, but for one thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the changes that was on, recommended was the owner occupancy. Right now, ADUs do require that the owner live on the site, and that did not get changed in this round of changes, unfortunately.
That was also my biggest disappointment when that happened. Like, you don't need that rule. Basically, what that rule says is you have to live there in order if you want to rent it, and so it doesn't allow landlords to come in and buy a property and then rent it out, rent both, and not be absentee owner.
I think it comes down to that. It's overregulated building form, because a single family home you can do that with. There's no qualms about it. And now Denver has all these licenses. You have to get long-term, short-term, anything. So why does ADUs get these special treatment?
Yeah, it's double regulated. That was my point too. If you already had to get a short-term or a long-term license to rent it, let that be the police or the enforcers of that. Right. And then you don't need to have the zoning code also read it too. It's redundant. And
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, like I understand why some people are worried about developers coming in. I know some developers that would, in a pinch, just start doing it, but they can't. And
in reality, that would probably be good for the city.
It would be,
because again, we're creating that more housing, different housing type, and different smaller rentals, which by nature can lend themselves to be more affordable. Yep. And so, we're for it. So we got to keep on that city council.
And what I like most about ADUs is it's a quiet density increase. It's not like in your face where you do a huge apartment building or something like that. You barely even notice these things are built when they're done. Right. The front house still looks the same. The neighborhood character still feels the same. But then you have another apartment in the back where a family member can stay, or you can rent to low income, or you can rent out to to people going to college or something like that. And it's so flexible in the way you can use it. That it's a win-win for the city. Mm-hmm. I was really disappointed when that didn't go through. I pushed for him to get rid of that rule, and I even wrote them in writing to get rid of that. And
right, because as you say, it's in the zoning code, which that's not a zoning. It doesn't pertain to the zoning.
Yeah. So that was a big disappointment. The other one was we just wanted them to rezone the whole city to allow for them.
So where does this come into play? Because I think it was like 2 years ago, there was Denver Blueprint, which is more of and correct me if I'm wrong, that's more like a 10-year or like a longer term plan, right? Yeah. So how's this all fit together?
Yeah. So Blueprint Denver was a big change to the city and how we want the future of our city to look like. It's a big multi-year, like 20-year plan. Okay. And ADUs were a big focus. I was actually part of writing that too. 5 years ago, so I was part of that.
2 years where they got passed, approximately?
It was 5 years ago.
A little bit longer.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it took a while. But I was on the mayor's advisory committee, and we introduced ADUs into Blueprint Denver. Okay. And then one of the goals was to say, yes, as a city, we have found that the residents of this city want to have ADUs, and we want to try to implement them in a smart way into the city's fabric. They didn't say we were going to rezone everything, because that was a little too much for people to grip with at the time. But it is stated as a general
vision.
Goal. Yeah. But what that does is, so if I ever go to rezone a property, I cite the Blueprint Denver and say, this is the long-term goal of our city. Therefore, my client wants to rezone that in accordance with those stated views. And then since that's done, we've had almost 100% success rate with rezoning, no matter where you are in the city. Wow. So you just, you say, hey, I want this Blueprint Denver's goal. Let's rezone this to have an ADU. And then they tack on a little one onto your property to allow you to do an ADU. Cool. So a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that when we started. like I was trying to find specific lots that allowed for ADUs, and I even gave, like when my wife and I bought it, I gave her a map. And I said, we can only buy properties in this map. And she hated this map because she finds something on Zillow. I was like, that's cute. Let's go that. And I was like, yeah, it's cute, but it's not zoned right. And I had to crush her dreams. And so we had about a lot of fights over that. But if I had known that we could rezone, we could have lived anywhere in Denver.
Yeah.
So I hope she didn't listen to that part. But
Well, and Matthew and I met because we have a shared client. So I
Yes.
helped these clients buy. They were looking for an area where they could build an ADU. They bought last summer, and they connected. They had already known Matthew and worked with him on professionally, and so they connected with him to help design and build their ADU, which is at what stage?
it's through Landmark. It's now into permitting.
In the permitting process. So we're following along with them to see how this build process goes.
Yeah. And once that gets wrapped up or close to finish line, they're going to come on and we'll document everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that would be a good one. I mean, that'll be 12 months plus probably, right?
It'll be 2 years.
Yeah.
Yep, it'll be true.
Yeah.
And actually, theirs is longer because they're in a Landmark district, which is a historic
It's the
overlay.
Overlay, yeah.
It takes an extra 3 or 4 months to get through. It's a pain in the ass. It does. Sorry, I will retract some of that. It does help to make a better quality building. I think that fits into the neighborhood a little
For
more.
sure.
But it's hard because you have different reviewers that come in and judge your building based on seeing it for 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And they think they're the designers and they know the site better than you, and they know the client's needs and all that. So they, and it's a very, it's kind of their judgmental, it's kind of their tastes get involved. And then you just have a lot of designers all coming to the table to build this ADU, and that's never too many chefs in the kitchen.
You're the most polite person I've ever heard talk about going through that type of review board. I've usually heard much more less happy comments towards it, much more frustrated comments on there.
I could say more colorful things.
But it's just part of the process.
I see both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like they have their job. They want to keep it, certain. That's just part of the process. Another 3 or 4 months. It is what it is. No big deal. It's just kind of, you got to go on that expectation.
Yeah.
Cool. So as we wrap up here, like what's a good way for people to get in touch with you, and what exactly do you offer services? Because a lot of people want to do ADUs, build ADUs. I would just say, let's clearly map it out, like what you can do for people.
Yeah. So best way, my website is krickdb.com. It's KRICKDB.com. Or you can find me on Instagram at Krick Design Build. Or I started TikTok recently. I don't do any dance videos, but I just do my drawings.
You got to be some top ADUs, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to get be with the cool kids and do TikTok. So I have like 5 posts, I think. But then I'm on LinkedIn too for Matthew Krick. So I got a few different ways. And but what we do offer is from start to finish service for building really anything residential. I don't just limit myself to ADUs. I know we're talking about that today, but I try to say that from the first sketch to the last coat of paint, we're your guys, and we can help you get through the entire process. And I first started doing this as an architect, designing and doing that. And I hooked up with a lot of GCs that some were really good. Some of them I'm very good friends with still, but some of them are just shady and out there to take as much money as they could from a client. So I wanted to talk about the cost plus thing real quick. But
let's talk about that, because that was one of the notes here said was just, just in construction in general, or any major rehab projects, basically don't do a lump sum payment up front, like a full lump sum payment up front. Yeah. Why? I
mean, so let's say the GC comes to you and says, I can build it for $300K. And you're like, oh, $300K is pretty good. It's below where my budget was. But in reality, when you start seeing their budgets, it's really coming in at like 200, and they're keeping an extra 100. And so they have some contingency, and they have to inflate it because in case something goes wrong, and they have to redo some work or a change order comes, they have to account for that. So they automatically push up your price a little bit just based on that. But then as you're going through the building process, they're going to try to find the cheapest contractor to do every single trade that they can find. And that's their goal, to find the cheapest guy that does flooring, the cheapest framer, the cheapest. And then they just try to skirt by with, the least amount of changes or things that a homeowner can see. And I, as an architect, I've come on site and be like, you guys didn't pour the right foundation, or you guys didn't put the right insulation in these walls, or you didn't do the right finishes at all. You just, did you go to Home Depot and do that? Or was it specific? You're supposed to do this. And like, well, the client approved it. So, or something like that. But it gets to be kind of sketchy because they're almost like embezzling money from you.
Well, they don't have an incentive to do the right thing because they're like, well, this is all I'm getting paid no matter what.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really align with what, it doesn't, the homeowner.
That's what 90% of them are. It's a lump sum type of thing. So, but there's a cost plus method, which is getting more popular in the construction industry. And it's kind of like your same way as a real estate agent, where you get a certain amount of percentage of the overall cost. So when you're building, like when we do a cost plus, we show them all the quotes that we get from our contractors. And like, for example, if you have a framer, that framer could come in at, we might have one that comes in at 12,000, another one comes in at 20, or we might have one framer comes in at 40. Like, it could be a huge span. And that guy that's charging 40, he might maybe do it in 2 weeks and knock it out because he has a crew of 20 people. Whether the other guy who's only charging 12 might be a guy that's working out his pickup truck and might take 2 months or more, and you don't really know what his backgrounds are. So we let the clients go through that and say, do you want the really expensive guy? You want middle of the road or most expensive? And most of the time they choose the cheapest still, because it's their money. And it's our job to try to find those options for them. But there's other times where you want to spend, like if I can vouch for a contractor and say, hey, this electrician's really good, I recommend him over all the other ones. Like, even if he messes up, he'll fix it, And a lot of clients listen to me when that comes up and say, okay, we trust you. We trust them. I hope they would. And right. And so that can go a long way. And then also you can pick all your finishes and stuff like that. So you get to see a whole spreadsheet of what everything costs per item. And then you can also help. What I like about it is, like, I can change the design to be cheaper for you. Like, I had one that project that we have with the structural engineers on Pearl Street. It came in too high because of some of the landmark changes, some of the historic stuff that we had, and so we're changing the design. We're making it cheaper for them, and because I'm the architect and the builder, I have that leverage where I can, I can take out $100K from a project if I need to. I'll find different ways we can find. So, because normally when you have a GC and an architect, they're almost always at odds with each other. They have two different missions, two different ideas. Like, the architect wants to build the prettiest, the coolest thing that's going to, set them up to be trending to get other projects. The GC wants to build the cheapest thing that they can get by with, but also still get new clients and stuff like that. But they're trying to capture as much money through the building process as possible. And the architects kind of just has a fixed rate that they do. And so they're naturally not going to see eye to eye when it comes to costs. So combining the two, that was always a dream of mine, to do the design build.
And now I can do that at Krick Design Build, I take it, right?
Yep.
That's exactly what you do. That's
cool. So you got Matthew Krick and Ken Krick, and we lead you all the way through. And we feel the people to help us too now, but because we've expanded, but we're expanding. And so if you know any other architects, we're looking. We got a lot of business. So
there are a few listening to the podcast.
Great to know. Yeah.
So awesome. Well, Matthew, this was great having you in. Yeah. We appreciate you taking time out of. I know how it is running a business with little ones at home, so thank you. Yeah. And congrats on the journey on starting your own firm. That is amazing. Love hearing the success stories and people going to real estate full time. So. We'll have you back in the future. And as we do the mutual clients, we should definitely like a video walkthrough of that because that'd be really cool to see. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, reach out to Matthew. All the contact details and show notes. Yep. So Stacy, again, thank you for co-hosting.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, everyone out there, you guys have any questions, comments, you know the drill. Reach out or post them in the comments. We'll see you next week.